Are you thinking about registering your company in Nigeria and you're concerned about the requirements and the processes of having your company registered in Nigeria? Hello, my name is Cynthia Tishon, and in this video, I'm going to be discussing the procedures, the requirements for setting up or registering your company in Nigeria. These requirements covers both foreigners and also residents within the country. So I'm going to be providing you with the step-by-step requirements and procedures in this video. So let's get right to it. Now, before I start with the requirements, I would like to just lay some few facts around the table, right? The first thing is that if you're a non-resident, if you don't live within the country, it's not necessary for you to visit Nigeria in order to have your company registered within the country. You don't need to do that. All you need is a lawyer or an accredited agent to help you with having your company formed, right? Now, secondly, when it comes to companies in Nigeria, we have three categories of companies, right? The first one is a private company limited by shares. The second one is a public company, and then the third is a company limited by guarantee. Now, for a private company is established generally for the purpose of making profits, right? The members of the company are entitled to profits from revenue generated from that company, right? And the minimum members or minimum number of members for operating or forming a private company is at least 1 to 50 members, right? Now, in the case of a public company, there is, of course, it's established for the purpose of making profits. The members are entitled to profits made for or generated from the revenue or proceeds of business transactions within the company. And there is no limit to the membership of the company. And for a company limited by guarantee, it carries the elements of both a profit-making venture and a non-profit-making venture. Now, let me explain. So, a company limited by guarantee, they are usually established for the purpose of promoting a cause. It could be a religious cause, a charity cause, a social cause, or it could even be for certain education cause, right? However, unlike profit-making ventures like a private company and a public company, they are permitted to do business or transact for the purpose of generating profits. However, the profits made from such types of companies are not distributed amongst members. Members are not entitled to the profits that is generated from the business transactions of a company limited by guarantee. Such proceeds are, however, only undertaken to be reinvested in the cause or the aim for which that company is established. I hope I've been able to create the distinction between the three types. However, for the purpose of this video, we are going to be restricting ourselves to registering or the procedures and the requirements for registering a private company limited by shares, right? So let's get down to it. Now, I'm going to be breaking down the requirements for residents. If you live in Nigeria or you're a Nigerian citizen and you want to have your company registered within the country, what are the requirements? So here we go. The first thing you need is a minimum of 2 proposed names. Now, the Corporate Affairs Commission reserves the right to either accept the name or deny it. Don't just it's an error to assume that the name that you submit is going to be accepted, because there are guidelines for accepting or approving a name. One of it is that the name should not be considered as misleading, or it should not conflict with a name that is already registered. It shouldn't be similar to it or sound similar either in word or spelling. Once that is considered, there is a high chance of that name not being accepted, right? Now, the other requirements include that for residents or for Nigerians, you're required to provide a minimum of 1 director. Now, under the New Companies and Allied Matters Act, the Act now allows at least 1 person to serve as both a director, a shareholder of the company. So you can start your company with just 1 person, right? Another thing is the minimum of 1 shareholder, and you need a minimum of 1 secretary. Now, for the secretary, it's optional. Currently, under the New Companies and Allied Matters Act of 2020, it's no longer mandatory for private companies to have a secretary. However, it is mandatory for public companies, right? So if you have a secretary, that's fine. But if you do not have a secretary, you can leave that out of the picture. Now, the 5th requirement is you need to provide details of the share capital of the company. The share capital of the company is just simply the amount of money that the company is starting with, right? So you just need to state that amount. And for private company, the minimum share capital amount is 100,000 shares. So for residents, it could be 100,000, it could be 1 million, it could be 2 million, up to 100 million shares, right? So you choose which you want to do, right? And however, I need to also add this for share capital. The nature of business activity of your company to a large extent determines the share capital. So if the kind of business you're venturing into is actually regulated by certain agencies, of course, those agencies will have a standard when it comes to share capital requirements. Let's take, for instance, if you want to operate in the maritime sector, the minimum share capital within that sector is 25 million shares. If you want to operate in the banking sector, depending on what area of financial services, there is that of the 100 million, there's that of 1 billion, 5 billion. So it's important that you consult with your lawyer or your whoever is helping you with the registration process to ensure that the share capital is consistent with maybe what the regulatory authority is saying when it comes to minimum share capital requirements. I hope that is clear. Now, the sixth requirement is you need to provide details of proposed business activities of the company. I think I've explained that. So if you're going to e-commerce, are you into technology, are you into finance or security agency, whatever it is, you need to provide that information. Also, you need to provide the contact information of members of the company. That is, by members, I'm referring to the directors, the shareholder, and the secretary where applicable. And by contact information, I mean maybe the residential address, the email, phone number, also their personal details like date of birth. Yes, so you need all that information. And then valid means of identification. Now, for residents, any of these four could qualify for a valid means of identification. Your permanent voter's card, your national ID card, your driver's license, or your passport, or what you call international passport, will suffice, right? And then signatures of members of the company. So the signatures of the members of the company is needed to be provided so that it can be arranged in the documents during the registration process. Now, for foreigners, or will I call them non-residents, if you do not live in Nigeria and you are a foreigner, your requirements are quite different from what is obtainable for residents when it comes to registering a private company, and I'm going to be outlining them here. The first requirement is you need to provide a minimum of 2 proposed names. The rule that I explained as it governs the criteria for approving a name would also apply in this case for non-residents. So ensure that your names are unique, ensure that the names are not misleading, ensure that the name is not similar to or similar with an already existing or registered name or trademark within the country, right? You also need to provide a minimum of 2 directors in your company. Now, this is very important because under the Companies and Allied Matters Act, any company that has foreign participation or a company that has a foreigner as either a director or a shareholder of that company is considered as a large company. And the law says that for large companies, the minimum number of members required for forming a large company are 2 directors. So you need 2 directors automatically, not 1, as against the requirement for 1, right? You also need at least 1 shareholder. So there is no restriction when it comes to the limit for a shareholder of a large company or a foreign-owned company. So 1 shareholder will suffice, and the shareholder could be a company or an individual as well. Now, with regards to membership of the company, that is a director or a shareholder of the company, another thing you need to pay attention to is the requirement of a Nigerian as a secretary or a member of the company. So in a situation where all the directors and the shareholders of your company as a foreigner are all foreigners, then it is required that at least a Nigerian must be a secretary within that company. In a situation where you do not want to have a secretary, then the Nigerian must be either a director or shareholder of your company. This is important because you're going to see the need for a Nigerian even in a subsequent licensing and also even setting up your bank account. You need someone who is on ground to help you navigate the regulatory requirements, for actually doing business in Nigeria. So it's advisable to make room for a Nigerian in your company. Now, if you're concerned about ownership, you don't need to have that Nigerian as a shareholder, right? But the Nigerian can be a director, that is an employee, an executive employee of the company. So that will suffice. I hope I've been able to clarify that issue. Now, another requirement is the minimum share capital of 100 million shares. Now, for a company with foreign participation, the minimum share capital requirement, unlike that of Nigerian residents, is 100 million shares. Now, let me explain this more better. It doesn't matter if that member is an African, maybe it's a citizen of an African company. No matter, even if it's Cameroon, Ghana, Zambia, any other African company, you are considered a foreigner. And so long as you present your foreign ID card, you are a foreigner, and the minimum share capital of that company is 100 million shares. Also, it doesn't matter if that foreigner is a minority shareholder. Even if you're having just 1% of the entire shares, you, as the minimum share capital requirement for that company, is going to be 100 million shares. Now, why is this a requirement? This is brought by the guideline or the handbook for expatriate quota. Now, you know that for a foreign-owned company and that has foreigners, automatically that company is employing those foreigners as expatriates. And a foreign-owned company will want to employ foreigners. It's optional. They may want to employ foreigners as employees of the company. Now, if you want to employ foreigners, or you already have a foreigner as a member of that company, or as a director, that director is already an employee of the company, and that company is required to have an expatriate quota in order to legally employ such foreigners or expatriates. And in order to do that, you need to obtain an expatriate quota. And the requirements for obtaining, or one of the requirements for obtaining an expatriate quota, according to the handbook on issuance of expatriate quota, is that that company must be incorporated with a minimum of 100 million shares. So that's why it's a major requirement, and it can't be waived, right? I hope I've been able to explain the reason behind the 100 million share capital requirement for foreigners or non-residents within the country, right? Now, the next requirement is the details. You need to provide the details of proposed business activities of the company. So if you're into e-commerce, engineering, banking, finance, you need to provide that information. It's very important. And also, like I said, depending on the sector, you need to ensure that the share capital of the company is also correlates with the minimum share capital, right? Like I said earlier. Now, you also need to provide the contact information of the members of the company. That's the directors, the shareholders, and the secretary. So by contact information, I mean email, address, phone number, date of birth. All that information is required. Now, the next point is, or requirement, is valid means of identification. So in this situation, any of your foreign ID card that is recognized by the government of your country is acceptable. And if you're a foreigner and you're providing an address in Nigeria, you live in Nigeria, then you'll be required to provide a Nigerian residence permit. Now, the next requirement is signatures of members of the company. That is signatures of the directors, the shareholders, and the secretaries where applicable. Now, let's get down to the procedure. What's the procedure for registering a company in Nigeria? The procedure can be divided into 3 steps. The first step is reservation of the company. So you provide the 2 names, and either of the names will be accepted or denied. Now, if the name if one of the names is accepted, that leads you to the next step, which has to do with application for registration. So in this case, you prepare, the members is prepared, the memorandum and articles of association of the company is prepared. Every document that is needed is attached to the application and submitted. And once the application is reviewed, it is either approved or queried. Now, if it is approved, then you will be issued your certificate of registration, memorandum and articles of association of the company, and the status report containing the details of the members of the company, right? So those are the 3 documents you get upon registration of the company. So there you have it. the requirements and the procedures for registering your company in Nigeria, either as a resident or a non-resident within the country. I hope you got value from this video. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section. And if you need to speak with us directly, you can send an email to info@lexpraxisng.com or the phone number on the screen, or even any of the contact links in the description icon of this page, and we will attend to you. And if you got value from this video, please feel free to like, comment, and share this video to anybody you believe will benefit from this video. And also don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more law and business tips for doing business in Nigeria. Until I come your way again, do have a wonderful day. Bye.